Welcome back to the Revamp Podcast. Today's guest is none other than Dan, the real estate man, Dan Harvey. Dan is a Pennsylvania real estate investor who has done all things fix and flip and rental property related. But what a lot of people know Dan for is his multifamily conversion projects, as well as being a successful mentor and coach to others. So we're going to talk a lot about the multifamily conversion projects in this episode because I know it was something that I was really curious as to how you could take properties, and Dan shares one case where he took a single family property and got it converted into a 5-unit commercial property without having to do a whole bunch of zoning and procedural stuff that I always thought kind of went hand in hand with it. And with these types of projects also come big fat paydays. Super thankful to have Dan as a guest. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment below. You can drop a comment with anything that you would like to see in the future guests. We have a lot of things packed with knowledge and information and great guests already in the future. But anything that you would like to see, drop it in the comments below. Share with someone you know. So today we have with us Dan the man, Dan the real estate man, flipper, landlord, multifamily conversion expert. I definitely want to dive into that a little bit. Landlord and everything in between, man. So I'm thankful to have you on the show with me today.
Thanks for having me, Drew. I appreciate it. I know we got a lot to talk about.
We got a lot to talk about.
Definitely excited.
Yeah, man. So I want to legit start at the beginning. So I know a little bit about your story and how you transitioned into real estate, but I want to dig deeper and share with the listeners too. So what made you first get started being interested in real estate?
Okay. So my story is probably a lot different than a lot of other people's. Is I was not interested in real estate at all. So I was working at SEPTA. I was working on trains, but I was a promoter for years. Started off doing small events, like corner bars. Built that up. Did larger and larger events until we were doing small stadium size events.
Wow.
So like 10,000 seater stadiums. And so what we did, I don't know if you've heard of like Rucker Park or the N1 franchise.
No.
Okay. So what it was they would take what they call street ballers. So like guys that's really good at street ball. And so we were one of the guys. It was me, my brother, and another buddy. And I had this idea because street ball was really big. This was like 98. It was really big. And people would come out by like the thousands to come see people play basketball outside. So I had this idea. I said, man, it would be great. We could bring them inside, have some other like entertainment, and do that. People thought we were crazy. Like nobody's going to pay for that. They can just go up here and see it for free.
Yeah.
And Drew, when I tell you this is and I'm dating myself, it's all good. This is pre-Facebook. This is pre-whatever. We just had this idea and we just started pumping it. And like anything else, if you really believe in something and you keep reaching out and talking to people, something breaks through. So we met this one guy who was friends with, and I'm not a big sports guy, but he was the coach of the St. Joe's basketball team. So you got to think whoever the coach was in 99 or 2000, he was a real big name. And so he said, hey, this guy wants to meet. Everybody was telling us, no, you can't have it here. You can't have it here, blah, blah, blah. And so we met the guy and we just hit it off. And God was like, you know what? I'm going to give you guys a shot at doing it. When I tell you, it took off like wildfire. We had people calling us from as far away as like Baltimore and Brooklyn, because what we did was we got the best ball players in Philly. We went out to Brooklyn. Again, just networking, found one of the coaches that just saw just bought into the whole idea. He got the best high school players plus the best street players from all of New York, the best players, got them on the bus. And we sold that thing out. We had about at least 6, 7, 8,000 people there. It was absolutely insane.
No crap.
And so
And that was the first event.
that was the first basketball. Yeah, that was the first. That was, building it up to that point.
Got it.
That was the first basketball event. And then we did that. We did that same basketball event throughout the country. So we went to the Midwest. We went down south. And honestly, I thought that was going to be my path to like becoming wealthy. It didn't happen. But what happened was, I was doing that. I was working at SEPTA, and my mom is a real estate agent, but she's a mom. You could figure this was 2001. I was 21.
Okay.
And but I was making money, and she was like, she didn't want me to do what young guys do when they're making money, but cars, jewelry, women, whatever the case is. So she was like, why don't you invest in real estate? I'm like, in my mind, I have no interest. This is mom. I'm like, well, okay, mom, I'll go look. I'll go make mom happy, and I'll let her down later on.
Man, thank God for mom.
Yeah. And so what happened was, as we're looking at different properties, as I'm pretending, it starts to hit me. Because sometimes I'm a little kind of slow with ideas. Like I was kind of a slow burn. It'll hit me. I'm like, you know what? This wouldn't be a bad third income, right? I got the job. I have the business. And, it wouldn't be bad, to have this rental income. And so that's how I got started. My first investment property was bank-owned duplex off of 57th and Hunter. And I tell people my strategy was super simple at the time. Property cost $20,000, and I had about $25,000 saved up. I was like, well, that works.
Yeah. Yep. That
was my whole strategy. So that's how I got started investing.
Damn.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you bought that first one?
I want to say 22. I'm not 100, but I would have to look back. 22, 23, somewhere in that range. I was in my early 20s.
Got you. So it was bank owned. So did you have to do a rehab on it as well?
Full rehab. Yeah. And I didn't know anything about rehabbing properties.
So what'd you do?
Well, I did what I did best. At that time, I was the overtime king at SEPTA. So I spent all my money buying it. So I would work a bunch of overtime. I would do some shows, would save up money. I would do some of the work. I was hiring jacklegs at the time because I didn't know any good contractors. And it was just like an on and off process. Took probably about a year and a half to get the project done. It was all out of my pocket. But we finally got it done and got some tenants in there, and I absolutely hated it. And I tell people, in hindsight, right, because I didn't have the landlording skill sets. I tell people all the time, like, being a landlord is a skill set. Some people think you just buy these properties and people pay you. It's like, no. I mean, maybe it should be that easy, but it's really not.
If you're really, really lucky.
Yeah, you're really, really lucky. But as a long-term strategy, it's just not a plan, right? You got to have the skills. I didn't have the skills.
Yep.
So I ended up, I was like, well, this landlording thing is not for me. So I ended up selling that property. And so I put it on the market on a Monday. I had 2 full price offers on a Friday. I ended up selling a property for like $83,500. And I remember, so when I was working and I owned it just like outright. So when I go to close and I get this big check, and I'm like, damn, right? I got this, check that's, basically more than I made all year working.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it certainly started to, it opened my eyes up to what real estate could be. Because at that point, it was just, something I did just because my mom kind of nudged me. But I was like, oh shit, like you can actually make some money.
Yeah, man. Oh yeah.
So that kind of got the bug going.
Damn. So what was the time frame from when you bought that till you turned around and sold it for 80 something? Was it a year, 2 years?
I'd say 2 years.
2 years?
It took me about a year and a half to fix it up.
Okay.
I might have did the landlording thing for 6 months or so.
Okay.
Maybe even a year. So it could have been about 2.5 years.
But you had the tenant out when you turned around to resell it?
I did. So there was 2 tenants there.
2, okay.
There was one tenant that was really pushing me. So got that tenant out, and once I got that tenant out, then I put it on the market and I sold it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So it was about a 2.5 year period.
Okay.
Roughly.
Okay. So at that point, you're still working SEPTA. You're like, man, I just had like a huge check. Maybe this landlord thing isn't for me, but maybe flipping is a possibility, or where'd it go from there?
Yeah, so it was definitely floating around. So what I had did actually in between buying and selling that, so I'm from Southwest Philly. I actually bought my parents' house prior to even buying that bank-owned property.
Okay.
So I actually owned the home. So I was living in that house, and it wasn't a great area, wasn't a great block. So I was already thinking about moving. And shout out to moms again. She was out showing a property, and it was in East Lansdowne, and she was like, "Hey, I showed this property. It's listed as a single family, but it's actually a triplex." So I said, "Oh, okay, cool." So I went to go look at the property. It was a 4-story triplex because it had an above ground basement and then 3 stories.
Got it.
And so the top unit, the top unit was the top 2 stories. The first floor was large, and that was 1 unit, and then the lower floor had a unit, but they let the first floor tenant for some reason use both floors
Really?
as one. And so I ended up getting that property for like $76,500. Because I remember, and it's just funny, but it's actually something for people to think about. I remember I ended up buying that property. I started to back out because the mortgage broker at the time the rate had jumped up. I was like, man, that's not what you told me, and I was a little frustrated. I maybe in my feelings a little bit, and I started to back out of it. But I was like, nah, I'll just go through and buy because it still made sense, right? This was 2000 and say maybe 5 or 6, somewhere in that range. And it was mostly cosmetic work. It wasn't anything heavy. So I was like, all right, fine. I'll still buy it. I ended up renting out the upper unit and the lower unit. I stayed in the middle unit. So it cost me nothing to live there. I met my wife maybe about a year or so later, moved out. The tenant that moved into the building after I bought it ended up buying it from me for 2 years later for like $180,000.
Damn.
And I was
Okay.
like, exactly. I was like, damn,
All
right? So,
all right.
Sometimes people, I know people right now are getting really caught up on interest rates. But imagine if I would have walked away from, just because the interest rate had shot up a little bit versus the profit I ultimately made, buying the right property. So I think there's definitely a lesson in there. But yeah, that's when I was like, yeah, this is real.
Yeah, you had like 2 deals now where it was like, man, everything kind of didn't even go the way that I thought, and it still turned out pretty well.
Still made a boatload of money, and I don't know what I'm doing. And that's when I decided, I said, man, like if I read some books, like I might be dangerous. And that's when I committed, like right before I turned 30, I committed that by the time I was 35, I was going to quit SEPTA. And so I started buying up a bunch of rentals, and I quit SEPTA 3 days before my 35th birthday.
Damn.
And so
Beautiful.
yeah, I've been doing this ever since. Yeah.
I love that, man.
Yeah,
I love
thanks.
that. So as you started buying rentals and everything, and that kind of became your strategy, like I know you said you were going to pick up some books, learn some stuff along the way, but like, what was that time frame like? Was it? Because I just know for me, like when I was still working a W-2 and everything, and I was trying to build a real estate business and everything, it's like, yeah, man, I was grinding like nobody would believe, 100 hours a week was a light week for me, right?
Easy.
So what was that time period like for you going through that grind of still having the W-2, but building the freaking portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, I was super laser focused. So the one thing about me, and I think people might can learn from too, is once I decide on something, like that's it. Like that's it. Everything after I determined I was going to quit SEPTA by the time I was 35, every other decision that I made was basically predicated on that, if it aligned with that goal. And so what I did was I was still the overtime king. I was working crazy overtime, but I did not increase my lifestyle at all. I was buying rental properties. I was doing the BRRRR strategy. This is even before it had the whole BRRRR acronym. Like I was just doing that because I was amazed at something that banks did when I learned that, and that was by accident. But I was laser focused. So it was overtime, take that money and buy real estate, take the money from the rents that I was making, add it to the overtime I was making, buy more real estate. I was also reading a lot of books, and mostly more books about mindset than about business, because what I found in my personal experience, but also from just dealing with a lot of other investors and business people, it's good that, the business skills matter, but your mindset is going to set you back much more. You can be the most talented
make or break
business person ever, but if your mind's not right, you're going to constantly be stuck. You're going to get in your own way. And so I really focused on my mind because I knew that the way that I was raised personally was more about survival than it was about prosperity. And I don't say that as a knock to my parents. Like they taught me the best that they knew. It wasn't to hurt me.
Yep.
But I also understood like that mindset was only going to get me but so far, right? And I was already past that survival stage, so it didn't make any sense to stay there. So I would just read things that just kind of challenged my view on how I thought about things. And that was really the most important. And then I would do things like, I would join groups and just network with other investors. But YouTube was really big at the time. So I would just go on YouTube and I would devour so much information. I would use any downtime that I had. I mean, I'm not there now, but there was a lot of free time at SEPTA, right? Once you knew your job, you could knock it out. So, a lot of the guys would kind of BS and whatever they did. I would take that free time and I remember we had this little shower area that like nobody used, and I had one of those folding chairs that kind of opened up. I'd sit in there with my books and my laptop, and I would just lock in. I would watch for hours and just try to get as much information as I possibly could. And like that was my life for 5 years. And I think people often underestimate, especially now, the way social media makes it seem is like it's just this. Oh, it's easy breezy. Mm-hmm. You take this course, and I'm not knocking courses, right? I sell courses, but it's the idea you still have to put the work in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It still takes time. You know what I mean? It's going to be challenged. No matter whose courses or mentor, you're going to knock you. You're gonna knock your head. You're going to have some issues. You're going to have some setbacks, and that's where the mindset piece steps in. Because if you have a weak mind, if you give up easily, right, and that's what I found takes a lot of people out. For people that even start, which is a small percentage, people who stay is even smaller because once people face problems, they just kind of give up.
Yeah.
And go back to whatever it was that they were doing because that's just a more comfortable state of being. Excuse me.
Yeah, man. I definitely want to dig into the mindset piece a little bit because I've seen you share a lot of stuff on social media trying to like help people break their limiting beliefs and everything. But real quick, I want to ask you, so what do you think it was for you saying you were raised with just like that survival mindset and mentality rather than thriving? What do you think it was within you that once you were past that point of, all right, I have what I need, that fueled you to want to do more?
That's a good question. I think it's a couple of things. I think that it's a curiosity, right, about, okay, and then it was exposure too. So I was being exposed to different things. I'm like, well, shit. I didn't know.
You saw the possibility.
I said, wow, people were even living like this. Okay, this is different. And then I'm reading books that are challenging some of these ideas, and realizing like, wow, I didn't realize that that's how I operated was off of what I frankly call a poor person's mindset, right?
Sure.
That I can do it all myself. you know, you're gonna save your way out of things, and don't take on debt, and you know, all sorts of things. You know, try to look for security, right? Which is a pure illusion. It's an illusion, right? It's not real. And I'm not telling people to be reckless,
right?
Because I was never even that person when people were telling people to like leave their W-2s. I'm like, no, I'm not saying do that either. I'm just saying that nothing great ever happens in your comfort zone.
Very true.
Right? Nothing. You know, just think about it. If you really think about your life, if you're really being honest, and you say, like, what great thing have I done that was just this whole relaxing thing? And, you know, you and I both, I mean, I've spoken to thousands of people at this point, you know, and, you know, during presentations and, you know, different groups and stuff like that. And one of the main things I hear that I know for a fact the person's not going to do anything is when I hear, as soon as. It never, literally, like 100%. I've never seen it happen.
Yeah.
As soon as my kids go off to college, as soon as I retire, as soon as it never happens.
Yeah.
Because it's this idea that growth is going to happen in this very comfortable place, almost like a spa, where it's like, no, that's not how it happens at all.
Yeah.
No, it
really just starts. It all stems from making that decision. Like you said, I made up my mind. This is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to freaking do it. That's it.
Come hell or high water.
That's it.
And I was literally willing to basically almost like die on that. Like, no matter what, I'm doing this.
Yep.
You know, and I remember when I decided to quit SEPTA, one of the things that I did was I didn't tell anybody. Like I said, I had that 5-year plan. I didn't tell anybody. And I worked with my best friend at the time, who was the best man at my wedding. I didn't tell him. And I remember when I was on the 4th year leading up to the, you know, 5th, or the end of that kind of that 5-year period, I should say. My wife was like, I think you should probably, you know, let people know, you know. And I did, you know, towards the very, I'm sorry, I had like 3-4 months left. And even in those 3-4 months, so many people try to talk me out of it.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Sure you want? Well, why can't you stay here? And
why can't you do both?
Yeah. Why? Yeah. Well,
right?
Well, why can't you do both? And what about your pension? And I think that for the most part, anyway, there's always some just straight haters out there, but for the most part, I think it came from a place of caring. But where it really comes from, even beyond the caring, is fear.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's their fear that they're projecting onto me.
Totally.
And I'm like, damn, I'm so glad I waited to the end, because I knew maybe
it would have fucked with your mind.
Yes,
man.
I knew maybe I'm not strong enough to go through 5 years of people trying to talk me out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and now it's like, oh, Dan, I knew you were going to make it. I always knew it. Can I learn from you? And listen, and if I can be motivation to anybody, great. But I know ultimately, and I've seen this many places, and it gives me perspective. Ultimately, we're all going to get checked out of here. Like we're all going to go. So no matter whether you play it safe or you don't play it safe, you're out of here. So it's like, what mark did you make on this world? Like what ideas that we all have these ideas in our mind. It doesn't have to be real estate. It could be anything. One of the things that I love way more than the money. And I always think like, maybe I'm just not a great businessman because maybe something's wrong with me. But I love seeing things that were in my mind that I turn into reality. Either properties or events or whatever that was just an idea. Yeah. And I took it out of my head and manifested it. Some people have never experienced that. And I feel like that's a shame.
Yep.
They're gonna die with these ideas, playing it safe. As it is like, for what?
Yeah.
You know, what came of that? You know, and who knows how many people that you could have helped, inspired, or whatever, that they'll never know your name, they'll never know your greatness, you know. And most of it is because of fear of failure, fear of ridicule. And I get it. I'm not knocking that. I mean, I still struggle with that. Nobody likes to look foolish, but it's like, so what? And people, anyway, people have this short of a memory anyway.
Oh,
They'll be on to the next thing in 2 seconds.
That's
They'll
exactly
laugh at
right.
me for about 2 seconds and then move on. Right.
That's exactly right.
But at least I try.
I got to ask you though. So for you to say, I think your words were, you want to make a mark while you're here. I don't think that's a normal thing.
No?
I don't know. I feel like that's not something that matters to a lot of people. It matters to me, and I think a lot about it. But I think that makes us the outliers.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's interesting, right? It's hard to kind of separate the way I think about things from the way other people may think about things, and I do understand the way I perceive things, think about things may not be the same. And I've been told multiple times that I am the outlier, but it's hard for me to believe that. I'm just like, I can't believe I'm the only one that has this,
I mean, dude, look, a lot of the ways that as any business owner, entrepreneur that started something from nothing and was self-made, it's like, dude, we're basically crazy in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, we're crazy.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
The way that we think about things, the way that you can just make a decision and commit to it and run full steam ahead towards it when you don't know shit about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy. That's crazy to most people.
It is. It is crazy. But I think the best thing about it is that after a while, you get so comfortable.
Dude, yes.
With the fact of just not knowing. You just say, okay, I just got to take these steps and something will come of it, right? Something. You don't know exactly what, but something will come of it.
But you know it's not going to kill you.
No. Yeah, no. And I've had things that, I guess that people act like will kill you. No, I've lost some money. I've lost substantial money. And, it's like, oh, that's the worst thing in the world. And it's like, no, I'm still here. It wasn't like a Thanos snap and I disappeared into the air.
That's it.
No, I'm still here.
Yep.
And actually ended up doing pretty okay on that year. You know what I'm saying? So, I think once you can learn to deal with setbacks, and one of the things that has helped me, I'm curious if this has helped you, is talking to people that I admire in the business space and hearing their path and just understanding I am not so far off to the left or to the right. Like, my experiences has been their experiences.
Absolutely.
Right? Oh, shit, I'm doing good. Oh, damn.
Yep.
Oh, I got it. Oh, not so much. And it's this cycle almost, until they kind of get over, the hump. And even at that point, there's still challenges. It may not be the same financial challenges, but there's still challenges. And so that's helped me. I don't know if you've run across something similar.
Absolutely, man. Look, I've always been a strong proponent of having mentors, being parts of groups like masterminds. I've done that crap for years, man. And I love it because, having people around you that either have dealt with some of the issues that you have or are going through some of the same issues, or at least are on the same trajectory, it makes it, a lot of the things that we do, it makes it feel like, to your point, everybody that you worked with, everybody that you knew, like, they're not business people, man. So when you have issues, it's like you're a lonely boat in the middle of the ocean. It's not even that you're looking to somebody for advice. You're just looking to have a group of people around you that understand. Yeah. I don't need a shoulder to cry on, man. It's like, I made my bed, I'm going to fucking lay in it.
That's it.
And I'm going to figure this out.
Yeah.
But if I can have a conversation with somebody that is in my world and has experienced something similar before, you're crazy not to, right? So I think it's awesome to align yourself with other people that have.
It is. And I think that's such an underrated piece of it. And honestly, I think is what keeps a lot of people back, because as they grow, because at least it should, as you grow financially, you should be growing your mindset. You should be growing as a person. That's the biggest thing that I've done, is I've grown as a person as well. A lot of your friends and stuff, they won't necessarily fit in that space because they have this other idea of who you are. And I'll just speak to my own experience, and maybe I don't know what yours has been, but as I've grown, I've had to change circles multiple times, because a lot of times people want to see you kind of as they saw you, and this new emerging person just doesn't fit, right? Or they want to continue down this, the same conversations, the same path, and it's like, nah, I'm on to different things. And some people may take that as like, oh, you think you're better, but it's like, no, I'm evolving. Hopefully, you're also evolving. And every time I do something, I just don't want to just get drunk every time or just get, whatever the case is. I just want to have, like, I have just as much fun. And I can have drinks too, but having conversations about business or about my family, about, you know what I mean? And so, I mean, that's been my experience. And then I will say, the beautiful thing about it is through the progress, I've also met people on the same path that I vibe with as well. So kind of found, I've evolved into other people that were kind of on that same path. I mean, has that been your experience? What do you?
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's, I don't know. I've, to your point about growing financially and having to grow as an individual as well, I was always very aware of that. And so is my wife, who is a really integral part to everything I've ever done, right? She's the most supportive woman that I could have ever asked for, right? But we're both aware that it's like, well, as I'm growing as a business owner and as a father, it's like, you have to be growing as well with me so we can keep our bond strong. And that's kind of how I've approached all relationships in my life, down to my company and employees. It's like, I try to grow everyone around me, because
how have you seen that work? Because I found it difficult.
It's hard as hell
to necessarily kind of grow other people. I feel like that's something you can certainly try to help them and try to influence them, but they have to have that in them.
They have to have that in them. But I think the best way, speaking to my experience, the best way that you do that, and I'm sure you do it very well because I know you, is be you and be transparent with the people around you and everything. And if they pick up any inspiration from that at all, they should want to trend in a direction of growth, because they see that that's what you do. It's how you embody what you are, where you came from, and where you're going. And I don't know, a lot of the people that I've had around me, even with employees, right? It's like they want to get to the next level. They're hungry. They want to make more. They want to have more freedom and everything. So that makes it a hell of a lot more easy to help them, because you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right?
For sure.
How many friends have you had throughout your life that you're like, man, I know that if you just made this one change in your life, like everything would get better for you, but you know that they're not going to do it. So you can't force anything.
No, you can't. I mean, I know, I remember when I first really started to just learn about real estate and just and see results, not just learn, see results. I'm like, yo, y'all need to get in on this. Like, you understand? Like, you need to get in on this thing. Like, are you kidding me? And I'm like, listen, this is before all of the Dan the Real Estate Man. This is just Dan Harvey. We're just out doing what we're doing, either playing basketball, hanging out, whatever. Listen, guys, I just bought this property. This is boom, boom, boom. This, here's what happened. I went to the bank, and you guys need to get in on this. I'll see. All right. And 10 years later, 13 years later,
oh man, I should have done that. I should have listened to you.
All this missed opportunity. I mean, real tangible and substantial wealth loss, because we can't get those. We can't even get those moments back, man. Right? And that market, because I'll be honest, a lot of
can you imagine buying houses for $20,000 again?
Yeah, it was crazy. The stuff, the opportunities I had right now, it's just not the same. Yeah. And I've talked about this. It's a different market. It's a different time. There's still opportunities. If you understand the business, it's still opportunity. It's just different. But I found that just to be difficult. And one of the things that I won't say warn people, but just let people know, listen, as you grow, some people will fall off.
Totally.
That's been the experience that I've seen across other individuals as they move, and people will try and hold you back through, again, certain terms where they know it's like, oh, you're, ever since you doing this, you're really changing, or, you think you're better than people, because what happens is oftentimes we stop ourselves. It's not like other people. And so they'll kind of play mind games with you to get you to stop your own progress, right? And I don't know if they're really being like that, if they're that Machiavellian, or it's just kind of something to say. But anyway, yeah, it's just, it's unfortunately sometimes part of the process.
Yeah, man. I love the saying that nobody bigger than you will ever hate on you. Because it's so true, man. It's like people that are actually out there doing shit, they don't have time to even care about what you're doing and hate on you. You know, it's always the people that aren't doing anything that kind of want to drag you down. And to your point, a lot of times I don't think that comes from a negative space. I think it does come from largely with friends or family that are like, oh, you sure you want to do that? I think that comes from a helpful place. But yeah, it's them projecting their fears onto you.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I'm with you. So, all right. So back to the timeline, right? So you're going through this, you're growing, you're buying rentals, you leave SEPTA at right before 35 years old. And then what happens?
Yeah. So, what was that? Christmas of 2014 is when I left SEPTA. So I had two main goals once I left SEPTA. One of my goals was I wanted to make $100,000 a year flipping houses to kind of recreate the income that I was making. And the other one was I wanted to network as much as humanly possible and not lose my wife. And the reason why is because for me, I just felt strongly that networking was going to create a lot of opportunities. And so I was a DIG member. Some people may know what DIG is.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure you know what DIG is. I was very active there and some other groups. And that, not just, and this is super important too, it's not just, because I think some people think like, the act of joining these groups, like, it's not magic. It doesn't do anything.
It's not doing anything unless you do something with it.
There's no pixie dust that goes in there that happens or something like that. I said, I need to meet as many people and add value to as many people as possible. So one of the things that I did, and some people are shocked at this, I am not a natural extrovert person. In fact, if I'm being honest, I probably lean more towards the introverted space. So I said, one of the things that I did was, hey, you know what? For me to get the most out of this, I'm going to volunteer. I'm going to be a greeter. Because for me, it was just like a very organic way to meet people. All I had to do was say hello, welcome to the DIG meeting. But I would just get to see people, and they would know me and just kind of get comfortable with me, and just say easy hi. It's easier for me than kind of having like some small talk that I got to kind of. I still don't like that. Yeah. But that to me is just like a lot easier way. And then it opened up with opportunities to run subgroups, which gave me the opportunity to again meet more people on a more personal basis, but also add value to people. So. If I know, like Drew, like you're doing your thing with wholesaling and flipping, I can say, hey, Drew, can you come out and speak? So it gives you access to people and to share your expertise, and it gives you a chance to kind of get to know me a little bit better. And I cannot even explain all the ways that networking has grown my business. And it's not like there's some like formula to it. You just got to get out there and meet people. You can really not have any real expectations, because you could go to a bunch of meetings and really not meet anybody. Yeah. You can go to one meeting, literally one meeting, that can change your whole life.
I totally agree, but I disagree that there's not a formula to it, because there is a formula, and you said it. Okay. That your intention was to add value first. Okay. I think that's the formula, man. Too many people look at something like that and they're like, well, I want to go, and what can I take from it? What am I going to get out of it? What am I going to learn? What's the opportunity that's going to be presented to me, rather than how can I help Dan? I just met Dan. How can I help you? I learned about you. Well, I have some resources that might be helpful to you. Give first. And dude, I think that is the formula.
Yeah, you're actually right there. But I think that goes back to something I said earlier, and that's the mindset. If you have a scarcity mindset, if you have a survival-based mindset, you always think about taking. That's your first thought, right? Is what can I get for myself? And it works a little bit. It's not a great long-term strategy, right? Because people figure it out quickly. Oh, here comes such and such. All they want to do is sit there and ask you a bunch of questions.
Just trying to
try to drain your brain down, right? And then move on, like locusts. If you can almost imagine, people really need to take this away. This is how you come across. It's almost like a human locust, just going in, trying to take up all the resources that you can, stripping everything, not giving nothing back, and moving on.
Yep.
And people figure that out really, really quickly, and they will either be very short with you or not forthcoming, and then you say, oh, these people don't want to share anything. No, they don't want to share with you.
Yep.
Because you don't bring anything. You just like if somebody had a party and all you did,
man.
Don't bring anything. But you come and devour
every party, every time. Yeah, man.
Hungry and thirsty, right?
That's it.
So don't be that person.
I think that's great.
Yeah,
advice.
so that's a good. So that was a good point. Yeah, definitely add value. That's something that I've been talking about for years. Is adding value. You don't got to make it difficult. Don't ask anybody like, what can I do for you? Because then you give me a job. Just listen. It could be something small, right?
Yeah, you got to be able to pick up on it. You got to be able to read between the lines. If I know that Dan flips and rents properties in West Philly and Delco and everything, it's like I have to be able to figure out, what do I have that can add value to you?
Yeah.
So
that's it. Yeah.
Do I have a contractor? Do I, you mentioned you had a problem on this rehab that your landscaper did. All right, I got a guy for you, make a connection.
And I think one of the things that people often overlook, and I talk about this a lot, especially I used to go out into the community a lot, speak at churches and stuff like that, basically in the neighborhoods that I kind of came from. And what happens is people think about capital generally from the standpoint of cash. And I say, well, that's one form of capital. But if you don't have a lot of cash, you have other forms of capital. Knowledge and know-how is capital. Time is capital. In fact, it's your most important resource. Mm-hmm. So you have to look at what you have and figure out, well, how can I add value? People say, well, I don't have any money, so what am I going to do? Okay. Well, get creative.
Yep.
Right? I'm telling you right now, this is super true. People think cash is going to solve all their problems. They'll drop $1 million on you right now, and you would probably just fuck it up, right? That's the reality.
Totally.
Right? Because you don't know what you're doing. Yep. You don't have the resources. You don't have the knowledge, right? People do it all the time. We see it all the time, right? And so think about what you do have. Focus and lean into the capital that you do have. And it may sound corny, but it's true. If you have time and I'm busy, hey, I don't mind running over here doing this. I don't mind checking on something for you, right? Stop thinking everything, and this goes back to the mindset and the poverty mindset. Everything has a dollar sign attached to it. Mm-hmm. Well, if I run over there, I need $100.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Yep. You know how many things I've done I can get paid for? I mean, it would be almost incalculable to tell people how many things I've done, real things, that I did not ask to get paid for, even mention. I did it because I understood it was a way for me to bring value.
Yep.
Right? Especially around people who have a lot more than me. Right? So, okay, what's the point? Okay, I make a couple of bucks, and then it's very transactional. Yeah. Rather than, hey, how can I separate myself from all the locusts, right?
Yeah.
To kind of go back to what we talked about earlier. So I want people to think about that. Like, think about what you do have. Think about your strengths, what they are. Lean into that. Not everything is about money. Mm-hmm. You only lean into the money because it's probably the one thing you have the least of. And so it can be scary. And I mean, I get that. I'm not downplaying it, but what I'm saying is that you have other strengths.
Yep. And it's funny, like when you focus on all the other things and you do a good job at it, the money follows. Like the money always follows when you add enough value and, you're focused on how can I help with the resources I have. Money does come, man. It just does.
It does. It's just a natural order of things. When you put enough value out there, you get paid for the value that you create. And again, that's why I listen to like Jim Rohn and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Like then you start to, oh, that's how that works.
Get paid in direct proportion to the problems you solve.
Yeah, exactly.
So true.
Yep.
So true. So I want to ask you, how did you get into the multifamily conversion? Because I know you were big on that. You coached on it. You did a lot of them.
Yeah. So I'd say up to roughly 2016 was when we had that like glut of bank-owned properties that hit the market. So my primary source of finding multifamily properties was was bank-owned properties. It was actually fairly easy at the time, right? If you were active enough and you knew the right brokers and stuff like that. Well, around that time, those leads started to dry up. Banks stopped selling those vacant multifamilies at like really deep discounts. They were wising up and seeing, hey, there's a lot of players that's back out in the market. We can actually sell these things, for a higher value because there's more people looking, right? So I started looking around and say, okay, well, I don't really want to play that game. I want to continue to get really good equity and good deals. Where are the opportunities? And so I started looking at these old large properties and some of the properties that have been converted into multifamily properties. Like they weren't purpose built. Somebody at some point turned them into that thing. So I was like, well, how does that work? And like, what is that process like? And so I started to kind of go down the rabbit hole of understanding zoning and understanding highest and best use. And then I realized, I said, oh, I can go in before they are, it is a multifamily property and buy it as that thing and create the value, right? And therefore I get a boatload more of the equity on the back end. Number one, because best case, that seller is selling it to me as whatever. I mean, I've bought single family properties and done it. I have bought garages, I bought warehouses, churches, right? They're selling it as that thing.
Right.
And oftentimes, based on my strategy, I can actually pay the price that they want. They're happy as can be, right? And then I'm converting it into what I want it to be. And so that's what birthed that idea. And once I married it with the commercial multifamily space, it just was that much better. Because you can create a ton of value in the residential space, but you're capped at comps. But in the commercial multifamily space, I'm only capped by the amount of income that I can create. And I've created some monsters where, it's just, and I've even I've bought properties from other investors that after I bought it, I was like, oh, I didn't even realize you could do it. I was thinking a triplex and I built a 5-unit building. Like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Now it takes some creativity. It's certainly a much more involved rehab process, building process, but you're able to just create a ton of value. I mean, I call it the burst strategy on steroids. I mean, like my average cash out, I mean, after I paid back things were 6 figures every single time because I was creating massive amount of equity, right? So it would be something like, for instance, like I bought a single family property for $83,000. I converted it into a 5-unit building. It was 4 apartments and 1 commercial space. We put about $250,000 into it, and then that appraised for $650,000 or $680,000. And I also apply that method with existing multifamily properties that by right I can add more units in. So I've done that where I picked up a 5-unit building, paid $160 for it. This was actually one of my best ones of all time. It was a distressed investor It was an existing 5-unit building, but by right, I could have 5 apartments and 1 commercial space, and it had a large first floor. They were only using the first half for the retail space. I built a 2-bedroom unit in the back. They had already mostly rehabbed all the other units. I spent about $100,000 on that rehab. That one appraised for $680,000. So my refi cash out on that particular deal was like $250,000. It was insane, right? And that's tax free.
Yeah.
Tax free money.
Beautiful.
Right? And that deal was less than a year, right? And that was just like one project. So
Man.
It's once you understand the principles and the concept, it can be utilized for creating the multifamily property, and it can be utilized for expanding an existing multifamily property. And so what I found is that just a lot of even seasoned investors, just are not that knowledgeable on zoning.
Yep.
And so that's where I just kind of found my niche. I'm almost feel a little. I feel like I might have talked about it a little bit too much, because now I'm seeing a lot of people,
Create competition for yourself,
market these properties. Oh, well, this is a single family, but it could be, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, yeah, it's one thing to understand the concept. It's a whole nother thing to actually execute on it, right? But there's definitely more people out there now and utilizing it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So let me ask you, for that one example that you gave where there was a single family and you rezoned it, and I think you said you got that one converted into a 4 or 5 unit?
5 units.
5 unit?
It was 4 apartments and 1 commercial.
That's got to be harder, right? To go from residential zoning designation to commercial and like mixed use. Like, what's that process like?
Okay. All right. So to be clear, you never rezone a property.
Okay.
So the properties are already zoned. And I'll just to give people just an idea of how it works. So there's 2 ways you can change the use of a property. There's zoning and then there's use. Zoning tells you what the property is, which means it could be a residential property. It could be a commercial mixed-use property. It could be a residential multifamily property, right? That just tells you what you can do with that property based off of zoning. Use tells you what the actual use of that property is. So to your question about that particular property, even though it was a single family property, it had commercial mixed use zoning already, which a lot of properties in Philadelphia do. It could look like a regular residential house. It's still CMX.
Okay.
It's a CMX 2 property.
Got it.
Right. So I didn't have to rezone anything, right? What I had to do was change the use on the property to 4 apartments and 1 commercial space. And that's kind of where the sauce comes in, is understanding what the metrics are so that you know what use you can get out of it. And that's the highest and best use piece of it. And then the other piece of it, obviously, is understanding how to build it out so that it makes sense.
Right.
And modeling it so that you understand that the back end of the deal makes sense to do all that work.
Can they still tell you no, though? Because I'm assuming, like, what's that process like? You're under contract to buy a single family home, and in the back of your mind, you're like, cool, I see this zoning is CMX, and I'm thinking I want to make this into a 5-unit building, which I should be able to do. It says so right here. You buy it, and then you go to a zoning board with your plans to turn it into a 5-unit. Can they tell you no?
Okay. Here's the beautiful part of this. There's no zoning board hearings.
Really?
There's no zoning board hearings at all. It's called by right. Literally means it's what you're allowed to do by right. It's 1 page. You have to fill out a zoning use form. That form, as long as you understand what the metrics are, right? You fill that form out. They look at the same thing that you look at, and it gets approved. Now, could a city council person step in for some unknown reason? I mean, yeah, but There is
in your
no
experience that has
never
thing.
happened.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot that I got approved for 44 units ground up. So still one page, one form, right? But that's where the expertise comes in, right? That's where the knowledge comes in, right? And you talked about solving problems, but, you know, that's where you can extract value because
For sure.
you're going to highest and best use. There, I stay away from the only time you have to go. Well, that's not true. Not the only time. It's the majority of the time when you have to go in front of the zoning board is when you want to get a variance, which means that zoning does not allow for what you want to get done. So let's say, for instance, it has a residential zoning, but you want to do multifamily. Okay, well, you'd have to get a variance. You could also have a multifamily zone property, but you wanted to exceed the density that's allowed by the metrics they put in place for building a multifamily property. Well, then you would also have to get a variance.
Got it.
But if it's inside of what's allowed, based on the zoning classification, in the metrics that they put in place, then it's by right.
No crap.
Yeah.
I love that, man.
That's it.
I love that.
That's the
juice right there. Is that specific to the city of Philadelphia? Like, have you ever done one of these conversion projects in any of the counties?
No. So, to my understanding, there are other cities that have by right zoning. I think a lot of the townships, they want more control.
Oh yeah.
So you have to bring it to them, and they have to approve it or not. Mm-hmm. I guess the one thing we'd have to understand is if that process was done in Philly, because it's such a larger, much more dense city, it would take forever to get things done. Not that it's, way fast now. It's not like it's super fast now. But again, I know going into, I can look at a deal and I can underwrite it, based off zoning alone. No, nothing. I don't even need to go inside and see the building. If I have the address, I can underwrite it 2-3 minutes. Tell you if the deal makes sense, doesn't make sense. Then I can go take a look at it.
Yeah.
Right. But I can make an offer if you just send me the address.
You pull up the zoning.
Look at everything that I need to do, model it. Right. Literally that whole process, looking at zoning, modeling it, less than 5 minutes. I mean, I do it. Sure. I've done it a lot.
You've done
it. And I teach my students to do that, right? And it's like anything else. It's just, once you do something, enough times, it just becomes
second nature.
It just becomes second nature, right? So that's why, going back to what we talked about earlier, I kind of have to fight myself now because I've done them so much. I'm just like, let me get out there. But my needs now are a little bit different. Not that I won't do one. I would if it made enough sense. But it's not nearly as high up on my kind of needs or what I want to do as it was when the market was different.
And a lot of that comes down to the current market climate, right? Interest rates, all that type of stuff.
Yeah. So interest rates are going to play a big factor, but they play a big factor whether you're doing what I'm doing or not. But the biggest reason why, say, I wouldn't have done them at all, say in 2022, was because the feds were constantly raising the rates, which means I can't even model this thing.
Yeah,
I don't know where the rates are going to be on the back end, right? Yep. I have no crystal ball. Now, and at least it looks like we sort of hit a high point. Seems like the feds are backing off raising rates, right? Exactly. So, okay, I can model. Mm-hmm. I can say, okay, worst case, this is kind of what it is, even if I bump it up, a half basis point or something like that. But there's always a delay between what's going on in the market as far as what's actually happening and the reaction between the buyers and sellers in the market. It's not instantaneous.
Nope. It's a big
right?
gap.
It's and so there's a gap, and so for those who just may not be in this space like that, it's just a simple illustration is if I bought your neighbor's property for $100,000 in June, and then 3-4 months later, I come to buy your house because I'm going to do the same strategy. And I bought the neighbor's house for $100,000. You're like, well, at least mine is worth $100,000, if not more, right? Because now time's going on and real estate goes up.
Everything goes up.
Everything goes up, right? Just magically, it all goes up. And so when I come to you and say, hey, I can only give you $70,000 because when I bought your neighbor's, the rate was at 4%. Now the rate's at 7%. Right? No! You're trying to cheat me. You're trying to steal. I'm really not. I'm just telling you, it doesn't make sense.
This is what it is.
And what happens is, generally speaking, it has to sit on the market for a while for people to get it through their head. It's not what it was.
That's right.
Your neighbor got in at a good time. God bless him, right? He sold at the right time.
Yep.
You didn't.
Yep.
And so you can either sit on it and wait for that to come back around again and ask yourself, does that make financial sense?
Yeah.
Right? Some people get into their feelings and they can't separate what makes sense and what doesn't. Okay, is 70 grand now worth more than 100 grand 5 years from now?
Right.
Which one makes the most sense? Right? But it's hard for people sometimes to do that math in their mind.
It's really hard.
It's like, I want my 100,000. I'll wait. Okay.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not going to stop buying.
Yeah. you might get 100 grand, but it's going to cost you more than that 30s. It's
going to cost you more and then quite frankly, 100 grand is just going to be worth less money then.
Yep.
So
totally,
even if you get your 100 grand, it's going to be worth less.
Totally.
But you also lost the opportunity to invest that 70 grand and grow it. So there's sort of two losses there, right? The cash is just worth less.
Yep.
But you've also lost out on growing the 70.
Yep.
So, again, sometimes, then that's why I like to, kind of talk about just basic economics and finances, because a lot of times people just don't understand those things.
Yep.
And it keeps them from making really good decisions.
Yep.
You know.
I'll still never forget that there was this guy that a friend referred me to, had, I think it was 2 or 3 multifamily properties in Delaware County. I think it was like 9 units in total. And he only had like 2 of them occupied. This was 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago. And most of the units, like 6 or 7 of the units, were almost gutted or needed to be gutted. Like significant amount of money this guy was going to have to dump into the properties to get them fully occupied and everything. And I was going over all the numbers with him and everything. Hey, here's what we would be able to buy them for cash right now, get you out of them or whatever. And he just wasn't having any parts of it. And I was like, all right, well, look, let's dig into this a little bit, right? Like, you told me, I'm going to mess up some of the facts, right? But it's like, all right, man, you told me that you've had 6 or 7 of these units vacant for whatever it's been, a couple years, and like, I'm not bullshitting you, man. You're going to spend $150,000, $200,000 to fix all these units to get them occupied. You said that's out of the cards for you. You can't do it. All right, cool. So let's just look at, with the tenants that you have right now, how much money are you bringing in, and how much is your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, right? And it really came down to, like, I ran the numbers with him. It was like, dude, he lost over 100 grand in the past couple of years just with how much he was paying out of pocket because he didn't have enough rental income coming in. The taxes were insane. Multifamily taxes in Delco, dude, I think it was like 25 grand a year in taxes.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
So I'm like, man, I understand you want more money out of it and everything, but you can't negate the fact that you've already lost 6 figures. Holding on to them more doesn't solve your problem. It would be a totally different situation if you could snap your fingers and tomorrow you could rent out these 7 other units and bring in income. But that's not where you're at, man. Yeah. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. He's like, that number is less than I bought them for. Yeah. What does that matter, though, man? That's insignificant. It means nothing.
It means nothing. It has nothing
You're
to do with
losing
this
money,
conversation.
you know?
I have a saying, and I tell this to people often, because people sometimes call me after they get into deals that don't make sense or or things go sideways on deals. We all know that. You do this long enough, things go sideways at times. And my saying to them is a saying I've been saying for a while, and it's something I live by. If you're going to lose quick. Period. If you're going to lose quick.
It's a hard pill to swallow, but it's so true, man.
Because here's what happens. Here's the rationale of most people. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna price a little higher so I can get my money back. Okay. All right, yeah, you're the first person that ever thought that up. Goes on the market, sits there. So now you have more holding costs. You have more exposure to people messing with your property and tearing it up. It sort of becomes stale.
Yep.
Right. And now you start trying to chase the market down. Versus, and all that time you're just losing money, right? There's just, generally speaking, there's some interest, insurance, all that sort of stuff is running in the background, as well as the exposure that you have with having that property vacant. Or you could price it at a point that's going to get people interested aggressively. Take that loss, move on. Here's the other piece to it. The longer it's on the market, the less time you have to get to a winner.
Yep.
The quicker you can get out of that deal, you can get to a winner and actually make some money.
That's it.
All that's doing is just keeping you from getting to a winner. But people can't wrap their minds around the idea.
Yep. Well, because it's painful and nobody wants to eat that shit sandwich, right? But that's the reality is the longer something's sitting there, yes, it's probably hurting financially in a lot of ways. But it's probably fucking with your psyche too, right?
Sure. Yeah,
it's messing with your mind, man. And
yeah.
Now it's like, well, I can't think positively. I can't look for opportunity because I have all this negativity clouding my mind.
Sure.
I can't look for opportunity. I'm stressed, man. Yep. I'm worried that I'm losing money. I'm worried that maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. Maybe, this isn't what I should be doing. It messes with you, man.
It does. That's a great point. And I was just talking about just the financial piece of it, which is very tangible. But that piece of it can fuck you up.
Huge, man.
Huge. Because you're not sleeping well.
Dude.
All your relationships.
Yeah, it can hurt your relationships, man. It's a big deal.
Absolutely. And I can sort of laugh about it, but I've been through there. I've been through it, I should say. And I live by those. I live by that. And I think that it makes sense, and it served me well, and so I think people should really take a long, hard look at what they have, and if they're trying to hold on or hoping for some Hail Mary to come through, it probably ain't gonna happen. Especially not in this market. You might have had a chance, and it might, and I'm just doubtful because people are not stupid, but you might have had a chance in this market. Nah. Nah.
That's the truth, man.
Just take your lickings.
Yep. We all do.
Yeah.
We all do.
There's
a lot of people, it's a pride thing for them, too. It's like, I can't lose money. I'm an investor, I've been around. I know people. I've made money for years. And it's like, dude, we all take our hits, man.
Yeah, we all take our hits. You take it, you move on. Like I said, you can still have a good year. I told you, like in the story I was telling earlier. I mean, in that time where I took a hit, and I took $100,000 loss on that one deal, which to me, coming from it sounds like insane. Are you kidding me? That year I still did good.
Yep.
Because I got it off the plate.
Yep.
Got it off the plate, and I just moved on to everything else that was working well. I had to get rid of that.
Yep.
So like you said, it's just not a drain on my brain. I remember we priced that thing so sweet. I got an offer, how you just posted. And they called and said, I have a perfect client for it, and they definitely want it. And sometimes that's real and sometimes it's not. But yeah, they locked it up.
Yeah.
But I was like, I just need to get out of this thing.
Yep.
Pay my investors back, right, and let me move on to the next thing. And that was it.
Yep.
And that's what happened there.
That's it, man. I have one that I'm closing on tomorrow, knock on wood, but it's a big loser for me, man. It's like I've owned it for a year and a half, and really all it came down to I had to do a sewer tie-in. There was a whole bunch of logistical crap that just it didn't flow, and I had other stuff that I was doing that was more important. Sat on the back burner for a while and everything, and it's like, well, it's still not the highest and best use of my time. So like my two decisions were sell now, and it's probably going to be, I'll run the numbers once it's done, but it's going to be about an $80,000 loss, plus or minus 10 grand. And so it's like, all right, I can sell now and lose 80 grand, or I can still go through with the project, finish it. It's probably, you know, if I started tomorrow, it would still be a 12, 14 month project that I have to lay out probably 200 grand out of pocket to get the project done. And once it's done, it's going to cash flow and it'll have equity and it'll be a good property that I can hold on to. So my options are lose 80,000 bucks right now, or float 200 grand out of my pocket for the next 12 to 18 months. And what's the opportunity cost of that, right? Because by the way, even though I'm taking an $80,000 loss, I'm still putting like 100 grand back in my pocket.
Exactly.
Right? So there's that. So really now the delta, it's a $300,000 swing. It's put $100,000 in my pocket today, or take $200,000 out of my pocket to float this project for the next year.
Yes. If you're lucky, right? Because
if you're
you
lucky.
never know, right?
It's always those unknowns.
Is all of those unknowns. And it becomes a math problem.
Yep.
Right? And so you do the math, and you know, if you're flush enough and it doesn't mean that much to you,
that's right.
Maybe you can do it. But you have to be honest with yourself. And take all of the emotional piece of it out of it, you know, and that's kind of difficult. Yeah. But that goes to, you know, the mindset and just, you know, understanding like, hey, like this isn't a personal thing. It doesn't necessarily say anything about me. It's a bad deal or whatever the situation is, right? I'm not a bad person. It's just, all right, let's move on.
Yep. Yeah. And learn from it. Learn something from it.
And learn from it. Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
Huge.
Absolutely.
So on learning, I know that you are a mentor, you coach people and everything. Is that something that you're still doing today? You're taking on like mentees?
I am. I'm still doing that. I'm also, I do consultations with, you know, people that are either looking to get involved or have a project that they need help with. And also, I have the digital version of the Multifamily Conversion Bootcamp, which sort of allows them, a self-paced for them to learn the strategy that we were talking about earlier.
Damn. Well, where can people get their hands on that?
Sure. They can go to dantherealestateman.com. They can follow me on Instagram. It's Dan the Real Estate Man 1. I lost the password to the first one, to the original. Man. And on Facebook, it's Dan the Real Estate Man. It's just, you know, a bunch of what I'm doing, you know, a lot of videos on you know, projects, and my intent is to really leave information on there that's actionable for people. And then if you see value in it and you want to work with me personally, then you can kind of go through those different avenues.
Dude, I love that. I think you got an awesome message. You've got the knowledge, the experience, the expertise. Like, I can't see why anybody wouldn't want to learn from you. You know?
Yeah, I appreciate that. One thing I gotta say, even I know we're wrapping this up. I gotta thank you personally, because you actually showed me, you know, a house that's very special to my family.
I meant to bring that up.
Yeah. I know. I know we're at the end, but
no, man.
You know, we've talked about our like networks and like relationships, and I remember when I met you up there, and you know, I was kind of telling you about my vision for the family, and that means a lot to me. You know,
it means a lot to me, man. It's the most important deal that I've ever sold.
Yeah, it definitely does. So I really appreciate that, because it really allowed me to put my family in a much better place. And
so let's
like
expand
really
on that a little bit. I want to talk about that, right? So it was a wholesale deal that we had. I marketed that thing out, and that thing was a wreck, right? This property was in Villanova.
Yeah.
What was the price on that? I don't even remember.
I think it was like $240.
$240.
And you know, I said, yo, Drew killed it on this shit.
I don't even remember what we made.
Drew killed it on this one.
You know what I was just thinking about? Because we're about to double close, literally the second deal that I've ever double closed. I assign everything. Like, I don't care. We're transparent with our sellers. I don't care if the seller sees on the HUD that we made $50, $60, $70, $80,000. Don't care. I'm good with it.
So we assign.
I don't think we did, because we double closed it, and that was one of the things, right? I think it was we were supposed to close on a Friday. And since it was a double close, I had a transactional funding company that did the A to B transaction. But I think you were using private money, right?
I use private money, yeah.
And I think there was something where some of the funds for the B2C transaction, so I bought it, then I was reselling it to you. Some of the funds came in from your investors, but not all of it. And their wire didn't hit till Monday. So my transactional lending company hit me for the 2% per day for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then I think Monday was a holiday or something too. So it was like 4 days. I was like, shit, man, I just burned 15 grand in transactional funding. Nonetheless, still the important part about that deal is you met me there and you're like, man, I want to live here.
So, I mean, just to kind of give us a story, I don't know how much time we have, but...
You're good, man.
Okay. And this is, I truly believe in like the universe and how things work out. Not more than just, I'd say, a week prior to you sending that email out. My wife and I had a conversation. Our daughter was in kindergarten at the time. And my wife is an ex-teacher. She is a vice principal now, but she has that whole background. And so we loved our house. Like where we were living currently was a beautiful home. Loved the home, nice piece of land, but not a great school district. And my daughter was going to Friends Media at the time, and so she was just kind of talking like, hey, we really need to kind of think about that. And then my son, who is younger, obviously at some point is going to be going to school, and so she was like, hey, we really need to try to find a place that is in a better school district. And it's funny, like I'm a Philly public school guy. I'm like, well, shit, I did okay, right?
I turned out all right. I did
all right. And she's like, nah. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. Especially with the educational stuff, I definitely lean on her because that's her expertise. And I, growing up in Southwest Philly, it was just like no greenery at all, just concrete to concrete. And I've always wanted an estate style property, like somewhere where you get big family events or my kids want to get married on the property. We were like literally having this conversation. And then a week later, like that popped up. And I was like, oh shit. I'm like, this hits a lot of the different, because it was like a little bit over an acre and everything else. Oh man, I'm like, okay. So when I went up there, and I think like that same day, I put it under contract. Even before, like, she didn't even see it.
Ooh.
No, she didn't see it.
That's risky, brother. That's risky.
She didn't see it. So I called her. I said, listen, after work, just drop past this address, blah, 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 and go take a look at it. She drove it. She was like, oh, because remember, it was overgrown.
Oh, yeah, man.
It was crazy.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, it was bad. And
we're going to have to pull up a picture of that for this video, yeah.
And she was like, oh, I don't know about this. I said, babe, you've seen what I've done. You know what I mean? I'm like, just, trust me, trust the vision. It hits a lot of the spots that we want to do outside of what this looks like now. And so she, just like your wife, she definitely, she trusts my judgment. And so she, backs me up on a lot of things. And so anyway, we ended up putting it under contract. And our first idea with it was to rehab. Mm-hmm. We were just kind of going to work with what was there. And so we had these plans drawn up, and we got the plans approved. And so we start doing demo. And as we're doing a demo, we just kind of like we're happy with it, but you don't love it. Mm-hmm. She's like, you know what? I think we should just tear it all down to the foundation walls. It has these big stone like foundation walls, like on three sides, and these columns in the front. She was like, yeah. So we wound up turning it all the way down, redoing the plans over again, to build a brand new structure over it. And I'll tell you what, like I was joking with you earlier, it's like the best Burr project that I've ever done. But it's like on my personal home, because we went through COVID, which was challenging, but the values in the area just shot through the roof. I mean, it was always a strong area. Anyway,
yep.
I was maybe like, maybe it's 800, 900,000 when it's all done. Once we got to finish, and this was like, wasn't even like finish. It just, I had to get out of that. Like, private loan. So I was like kind of pushing it along. It appraised for 1.25. But all day, right now in that area, that house will probably sell for 1.7 to 2 million.
Ooh, baby.
All day.
Well, what's that missing piece in there? Your rehab. So you bought for 240. What do you think your rehab was?
I stopped counting.
I hear you.
I honestly stopped counting. But
Give us an estimate number.
I'd say
3, 4?
No.
No? Under?
No.
Over? Over a lot?
500.
5? How many square foot is that?
The main house is about 4,500.
Main house. Listen to him. The main house.
And then we built the secondary structure, which is like 700 square feet. So it's about 5,300 square feet. Yeah, all in.
That's not bad then.
Yeah,
that's not bad.
Yeah. And there around there is about $400 a square foot.
Damn.
Out there. Yeah.
Damn.
So
that is the best bird of all time.
I'm telling her, like, listen, maybe we should sell this thing.
Yeah, right. Could be sitting pretty.
Yeah.
Could build another one. Yeah. We could do this process again.
Do this thing all over again, man. But no, I definitely wanted to thank you, man. It's my kids love it. It's actually a really great area, So a lot of opportunities come out of that.
I love that, man.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it.
I love that. That's the most important deal that I've ever sold in my life. So that's huge.
That's what's up, man.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for coming on. This has been awesome. I think we could probably let this run for another couple hours. Yeah. We could probably dive into some of the private money stuff you've done, borrowing money, but we'll have to save that for another time, my friend. But
absolutely, man.
Thank
Appreciate
you so much.
you.
This has been fantastic.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Dan.
Talk to you.